All right. So my name, Albert Mitchell, the infamous Mr. Wargo here to my right. So a little bit about we're going to go into smart operations, and we are going to stay on time.
Try to get you guys to lunch.
So smart operations is not so much something, a new technology. We're not talking about a new protocol or anything like that. We're talking about mostly a operational simplicity type of feature set and trying to help customers roll this out into their processes and their procedures of how they operate the network today. So we went out and conducted a study. We got a little bit of money. We can hire consultants and stuff like that to do this. So of course, we sponsored the study, and it came back with the results that we wanted. Surprising. So how do people spend their time? So this is what we're looking at from a smart operations. This is part of the problem that we're trying to solve.
Total cost of ownership and
total cost of ownership.
Whenever you guys use those kind of terms, it's all about how many hours are you spending doing these things, how many people are you paying to do those things, and if I can reduce that, then I can reduce costs.
Right. So just troubleshooting, installation, and refreshing equipment takes up a large amount of customers' times. So this is where Cisco's coming in. We're saying, okay, we can help address some of this. We talk TCO, let's walk TCO. Let's actually do something to help. So one of the problems that we have, and we love it when customers have this problem, right? Is they're refreshing the network, and they are getting a whole bunch of new switches, and they literally arrive on pallets. They're looking at boxes of switches. Everything has to come out. So what we find is that customers will install them, but it's too time-consuming to say upgrade all the switches. And if we're talking hundreds of switches, I'm not going to go through the process of trying to upgrade them all. I'll just take whatever is on whatever the manufacturing image is, and I'll just live with that. And so we're pushing out all these brand new features, and they're still running image that came from 2 years ago because that's what we have installed from manufacturing.
And let's be honest, we never have any bugs, so go ahead and keep using that code forever.
Exactly.
So saying, not just features, but you know.
So one of the things we're seeing is with the compact switch that's going around is this is kind of exacerbating the problem. It used to be 48 ports or 24 ports, and now we're getting down to just 8 ports. So that just scales up. So for every time you need 48 ports, you got to buy 6 compact switches. So the number of devices that you actually have to manage touch is increasing. So what are we doing to solve that problem? So one of the things that we have is we have Smart Install. So Smart Install is a way it's a day 0, day 1 type of technology that just automatically places a cookie cutter config and the appropriate iOS image that you would like to have. So those switches today, that one right there comes with 12253EX. So that is an iOS release that is years old. If we're talking SXP or MediaNet or some of the later TrustSec functionalities, you can't use that switch today because the software is too old. So how are we going to automatically upgrade that for you? So one of the things we're trying to do is you take the switch out of the box, which we're going to call the client, and in that particular case, you don't even have to connect the power cord. You just have to connect the Ethernet to it, UPoE, and it comes up and powers up. Right? One thing is via CDP, we're going to detect exactly what type of device that is with a CDP exchange between the client and what we're going to talk about as the director. The new switch comes up, so we discover it. All switches that running Cisco, all Catalyst switches running iOS, come up and run a thing called auto install. Auto install is something that we've had on routers for a long time. iOS has it. We already have it today. Every switch shipping since I've been in Cisco has auto install. And what auto install does is it comes up on VLAN 1 and says, provision me. So this is what we're doing with Smart Install. We're taking advantage of the auto install functionality on the clients already, which has already been shipping. And we say, okay, we'll provision you. So what happens then is we have a device called a director. We're going to talk about what those devices are in a little bit. It serves the DHCP. Inside of this DHCP, we're using standard RFC options to put in what's your host name, what's your TFTP server, where your iOS image is located, and where your configuration file is located. All already in the RFC. I forget the name of the RFC or
I
the
don't
number
remember
is,
either.
but already in there, and we pass this all down to the client. Now, you could do this in your DHCP server today. You don't need Cisco's Director Smart Install functionality to do this. But what the value add that we're adding here is you can provision this per device. So for instance, if you do a DHCP, how are you going to differentiate a 2960 from a 3750? They don't run the same image and they don't have the same configs. So how would you, if you had a centralized DHCP server, how would you differentiate a 2960 from a 3560 from a 3750 so that you didn't overly complicate your DHCP server and make sure that each one was getting the appropriate options, because they're not going to have the same config and they're not going to have the same image.
And
So-
even just to add some more color to that, even similar devices. So it may just be a 3750 or 3560, but you've got building 1 versus building 10. They've obviously got different IP addresses, different needs within that building. So it's the same device. If you just brought it up and just sent some totally vanilla config to it, then they would be wrong. So what we're going to talk about is some ways to just group these, and that's really what the above and beyond that Smart Install brings.
Right. So the ability to differentiate based on the location of the device as well as the type of device, which is simplified with the functionality that we've put into our director in this case, as opposed to trying to do it via DHCP servers. And the other thing they have about DHCP, and when we talk about this, we say you can use an external DHCP server, and most customers prefer not to have to touch their DHCP server for their switches. Because
So what he's saying is you can run DHCP server on the switch itself.
on the director, correct?
Yeah. You can use an existing DHCP server somewhere off in the cloud, or you can actually configure DHCP on the director itself.
But they already have DHCP set up for their other subnets for wired and wireless and the other devices that are the more end devices that are set up for DHCP. To have to set it up for networking infrastructure as well is problematic for them. They prefer not to do it. So then what happens is there's a centrally located TFTP server that would have the image or config for all the types of clients that you would have. The client just comes and retrieves all those, reboots with the new image and the new config. 20 minutes per client.
So how do you tag the ID of the? So you're saying you solve the problem of unknown device type, and you give it the specific configuration needed for that particular device, port layout, etc.
Okay.
How do you characterize that specific device in the director?
So
to
the-
fetch the correct
Very good
TFTP?
question.
The uniqueness of it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that part we haven't solved. So you don't get a unique host name or a unique IP address. So it's the cookie cutter aspect of it. So if you have
So they all come up with the same config.
they all come up with the same config.
That
So,
I just want to elaborate on that. I don't think that's incorrect or untrue. But what you can do is base it on the MAC address, and so there's certain things where you can have a certain level of granularity. Because that's what I was saying.
Okay.
And even to answer the question, what you do, because this is really director now, which we haven't just yet gotten to.
Sure.
But on the director, you would define what these groups are and say, I have the building 1 3750s, which are different from the building 10 3750s.
How do you differentiate a 3750 from a 48 from a 3560 24?
As far as its basic
it's in
nature,
the
that's
CDP.
Yeah, that's going to be part of
But
CDP.
But the CDP information gets translated into the TFTP request.
well,
Do you-
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a sequence of events, and,
Okay.
and we didn't want to overwhelm you guys with slides. I actually
No,
have
that's fine.
the
That's
the 100-slide
But
version.
that's the bit, like you're saying, that's the bit, you're solving that problem.
Yes.
Exactly.
And that's the mechanism you're using.
And then you just
Exactly.
have a whole bunch of these set up on the DHCP server, and they can go out and it'll directly query the
Okay, so that's
config
where
that's correct.
having an intermediate intelligent device to translate is a benefit.
Correct.
It sees the DHCP request, or
Yeah.
the Discover come in on the same port that it sees the CDP as well. So it correlates the CDP with the DHCP and says, aha, I got
Why
you.
wouldn't you just use a vendor class option that manufacturers are using all over the place? Phones, I mean.
Sure. I mean,
Right,
well,
so
mainly
put
because
your-
DHCP is
Put your vendor class
well known.
option there that says I'm a 3750, I'm a 30, I'm a 3000, I'm a 4000, I'm a.
Well, it's what I think the point I keep trying to make is there is that granularity to define above and beyond just what the box is, but that same box in building 1 is different from that same, actual product ID from that same product ID in building 10, and everything in between, right? And so there's a variety of these special little groups that you can define, and you can make them all vanilla. There actually is a vanilla option. There's a custom option. I think we're jumping ahead a little bit, but as long as people get the
But the vendor ID is good. But what happened was, in all of our products that are all of them support the auto install functionality, they didn't all populate the vendor ID correctly to identify themselves, or they just said 3750, something generic. So the
48 port or
CDP,
28 port.
the CDP actually has the specific product ID that it has. So and so you can't go back to 12255 like if that's what's coming from manufacturing because that ship is sailed, right?
Right.
And so that's done. So if they either all supported it or they didn't. Okay. So quickly, the devices that support the director functionality. So most of the products on the ISR, in fact, all the products on the ISR, all of the 3K, the 3750, 3560 support it. The 6500, we're proud to announce, is now a member of the Smart Install Director family. Thanks for your hard work on that one, Sean.
Thanks, guys.
And the
what I
Catalyst
can.
the Catalyst 4500 is coming in the next software release in the 4500, which is January of next year, so a couple of months away. And these are all the clients, so it's a hefty list of clients as well. So the 3750s can be directors as well as clients. So this means, you just plug it in, the network recognizes it and installs. So we have a couple issues with the uniqueness aspect of things. So one of the use cases or deployment applications we're seeing is retail. So lots of times we'll see a situation where they'll have a single ISR, maybe a couple of 2960s as a layer 2 aggregation, and then they have special things where they have front of the store, back of the store type of configuration. So this is a very popular type of situation. We are having lots of conversations with customers about how to set this up. As we're even still educating our own sales force on how and when to use this and what this is. So it's relatively new and it's creeping into our own sales force process, and they're thinking about it and telling customers about it. So Sean, you want to talk about 6500?
Absolutely. So, in the last slide, you saw a bunch of different options. I mean, it's basically your first hop distribution aggregation layer device, right? So whether we're talking about, a traditional campus, right, where you've got all these different buildings, so that's also why 4500 is being considered. But most traditional models today have a 6500 at the aggregation layer and then a variety of 2K, 3Ks at the access layer. So that's and my experience has been predominantly with the 6500, but when you put in the ISR, it just depends on where you might actually play it. We've actually, in additional conversations, had people ask us, if it's a metropolitan area branch office, so I'm still Ethernet connected. The only limitation is the length of the medium and what the optics can do. So if you're using, these LRs, ERs, and these guys, you can get into the 40 to 80 kilometer range, and it would all work.
Speak real quick
Question?
on pricing.
Okay.
It's a software feature.
I love the price. No extra charge.
Zero.
No extra charge.
for
That's
what
2 free
level
things in a day.
No.
Well, you gotta buy the software. I mean, come on.
What you're spending.
But it's just a software feature.
If you get
Okay.
this
Cool.
feature, you
Okay.
get the base software for free. That's
Correct.
what-
Exactly. If you pay for this, well, if we're going to throw an IP base on all your 3750s.
Thanks, man.
You gotta buy the box.
Yeah, so there's no additional charge, there's no license, it's already built in.
And we've got some great demo videos. We didn't
okay.
want to bog
So-
you down with a big demo, but we can share that with you guys.
I'm going to very quickly go through this because I'm already out of time. So the other part of the automation that we're talking about when it comes to smart operations is we have auto smart ports. So once your switch is installed, we also have the feature functionality to understand what type of device is connecting and then automatically apply a configuration based on that. And that uses, again, CDP and LLDP for those devices that support it. And most of the devices in this world do not. So then we're also going to be able to use the Mac OUI. And one of the cool things about this is we detect these devices using device classifier. So you can actually see on the switch, if you have something like this, how we've actually classified these devices and what they are. So I took this from a sample. So one of the things you can see is if I look at this, I can see all the devices that are attached to this switch. So I can see where the access points are. I have an HP printer, which soon to be replaced by a Xerox printer. But where's my laptop? So I also have we also have these things called unclassified devices. Not everything is classified, but it's snooping on the DHCP as well, and it's able to detect some of the options in the DHCP Discover with Microsoft. So I can see where I'm running Apple, Linux, Microsoft type application, so I can really get a lot of visibility into what's happening. So this ties directly in with the ISE, which we didn't really go over today. The ISE is doing a lot more granular classification than this, but it's the same type of database and functionality that the ISE is using. It's available on the switches today.
Regardless of the director feature, that's just nice to have.
This has nothing to do
Yeah,
with the
it's
director.
two parts of a bigger thing.
Yeah.
But just as a general usability point of view, having enhanced CDP neighbors with MAC address or UI identification is that's a nice usability.
We're trying to help
for
the out.
for engineers.
We're trying. It's a total TCO thing.
It's true up the softball.
So I thank you very much. When I walk
No,
in,
it is nice.
when I
Seriously,
walk into
it
a
is a
wiring
nice
closet,
feature.
when I walk into a wiring closet, I can't see which port the printer's connected to.
That's right.
All I see is a bunch of wires coming into switches.
That's bad
So
cabling, isn't it?
that is bad cabling.
Well, and we tell people, you know, and we're marketing guys, right? So let's be honest. We're out there, we're trying to pitch this. You know, I say, look, you know, it's Saturday. I'm sure there's a receptionist or a security guard there, but they're not a networking person, right? But if they can understand a power cord and an Ethernet cable, they can in fact reinstall the switch for you. So.
Yeah.
All right.
Very good.
Trying to stay on time.
Thanks,
Thank you
guys.
very much.